The gym at the high school is a night oceaneer thick with sweat and smoke. Cots lined like a breakwater, murmurs catching and breaking against the hard varnished floor. A boy wakes as if pulled from underwater, breath tearing, fingers clawing for a door that isn't there. His mother cups his face and says it's only the wind pushing the tarps. But in this town, wind has a new name, and it's not kind. Outside, floodlights chew at the dark, and the ash, fine as grief, drifts back down in slow, purposeful spirals. Aisha stands beneath the bleachers with a thermos that has forgotten how to be hot. She's a public health psychologist, brought in with a team that arrived after the fire found the canyon and turned it into a kill. She watches the tide of neighbors who now say their addresses like eulogies. There's a language table with 3 folding chairs and a handmade sign offering Spanish, Vietnamese, and we'll find yours. The nurses juggle blood pressure cuffs and insulin in a cooler that hums like an insect. A banner cast off from a winter dance hangs in a corner. Starry night, someone flicks it with a tired hand and laughs a once-in-a-week kind of laugh. Joaquin sits on a bench with his back to the wall, sleeves rolled, knuckles raw. Firefighter, search and rescue when the mountains require it. He keeps a mug he isn't drinking from near his lips as a prop against questions. In the pause between sirens earlier, he heard the house on Cedar crack like a vertebra. The woman in her 80s in the back bedroom refused to leave at noon, folding linens that would become the only thing left. He carries the sentence, "I'll be back," like a weight he can't set down. Because he wasn't, and because the road was gone by the time he turned the engine around. Aisha's team doesn't wear scrubs. They wear plain shirts, no logos, and name tags that don't require pronouncing. They don't say trauma unless someone asks. They say, "Are you safe? Do you have someone with you? Is there a place you can lie down?"
Oh.
They don't call what they do therapy, it's not. It's psychological first aid, the simplest act of a hand on the doorframe, a cup of water, a list written on a sticky note when the brain won't hold anything. It's evidence and gentleness in equal measure. No one gathers everyone and makes them tell the story, all at once, in a circle, under lights. Those old debriefings sounded like catharsis, and sometimes acted like salt on a wound. The research is clear enough. Don't force the telling. Build the boat first. At Cat 27B, Tenzin smooths a quilt over knees that have walked farther since Tuesday than they did in the past 2 years. He left Tibet as a boy, California as a man, and the house he paid off last spring today. He will say he is fine until someone asks about the cats, and then he will cry as if the fire started for that reason alone. 2 cots over, Miss Delgado stares through a space where her husband should be. His phone pings in a pocket no one can call now. Missing tastes like a warning and a lie at the same time. The coroner's office has set up a small, careful room across town for DNA swabs, less a lab than a confession. The word for this kind of grief is ambiguous loss, Aisha tells a volunteer. Your body doesn't know how to mourn what might still be walking toward you. They've set up a kid's corner under a basketball hoop that swallows the echo of crayons on paper. The drawings are very clear. A house with a red X. A dog with a happy face. A truck with lights. One child draws the wind as a hand. Mara, the school counselor who now works in a gym without walls, keeps saying the same 2 sentences. It's normal to feel this way in an abnormal time. Nightmares don't mean you're broken. They mean your body is making sense of danger. She watches for what won't subside. Kids who stop playing. Kids who blame themselves. Kids whose parents can't hear them past their own sirens. The loudspeakers crackle with the shelter manager's voice. Dinner ended hours ago. Breakfast is a promise with a time attached. Outside, the mountains hold heat like a secret they won't release until dawn. The city's water is brown from hydrants run open, and the line for the charging station curves like a question mark. The power company's trucks hum in the lot, asleep standing up. In one corner, a woman from the next town over rolls out a yoga mat and shows 3 other women how to shake the smoke from their muscles. No word for it exists in their shared vocabulary, so they breathe together until the room remembers we are animals with lungs, not sirens. Joaquin's phone vibrates and stops. He doesn't look. The firefighter beside him tells a joke out of habit, and then flinches as if apologies are sparks. You can smell the fire still, a sweet, oily cut through everything. You'll smell it in his sleeves a month from now, when the air is clean, and it will pull his heart rate up without asking permission.
Ow.
That's how triggers work. The body's smoke alarm is set to sensitive after a blaze. It's adaptive until it isn't. His captain told him this morning about a free counseling line for responders, a peer team trained in listening. He nodded, filed it away under later. He knows 3 guys who drink later for breakfast. At the far end of the gym, a table with clipboards drags a line like a net, forms for FEMA.
Ow.
For the state, for the small check that won't replace a kitchen but buys gas. People step into the paperwork as if into waves. The volunteers wear t-shirts printed with the word resilience in a font that looks like a fist. The word is a life raft some nights, and a polite way to say you're on your own on others. Aisha crosses the floor, stops when she sees the boy who woke up drowning earlier. He's tucked under a blanket now, the mother's hand making circles on his back as if drawing a doorway. When will it go away? The mother asks, not looking up. Aisha knows better than to guess. For most, the flashbacks fade as weeks pass. The mind files the fire under past, not present. For some, those files never close. Rates of post-traumatic stress after disasters vary, she can say, but what she says is, we will make it quieter. We'll keep the routines coming back. School, breakfast, stories at night. Routines are lifelines. The brain aches for pattern when the world forgets it. A gust of wind slips through the cracked doors. The tarps rattle like a giant exhaling, and someone near the cots jokes too loud about the sirens, the night swallowed. Mara looks up, ready to redirect, and then the sound switches sharp, electric, a tone tuned to bone. The emergency alert test the shelter was supposed to run at noon and didn't. The ceiling speakers open their metal throats, and the room startles. Into a single body, a flinch, a wave of breath held without agreement. A cot topples, cup spills. The boy who drew the hand of wind bolts upright, eyes wide, lungs grabbing air as if it has learned to be scarce. It's a test, the manager yells over 100 footsteps. It's a test. The word doesn't land. The noise is a bridge back into last night, and it's too well built to resist. A man in line for the forms clutches his chest and sits down hard, panic heavy as a brick. A woman grabs her go-bag with muscle memory and heads for the door until Mara's palm meets hers. Aisha raises a hand to the control booth cut. The tone dies mid-sentence, leaving silence that presses like hands against ears. For 3 beats nobody moves, then movement returns and stutters. Breath softer, shoulders lowering, a laugh too loud like a release valve. Someone fumbles with a radio. Text pops on a row of phones at once. Flash flood watch for the burn scar starting tomorrow night. Rain on ash turns slopes into slurries. Mud remembers the house's path downhill. The gym breathes out, then in. For the second time in 3 days, the words move like a weather front through the room, not fire. But another word that will steal sleep. Joaquin looks down at his shaking hands, willing them still. Aisha's eyes find Mara's across a sea of cots. Even the seasoned among them feel the floor move in a way that has nothing to do with earth. The loudspeakers are quiet now. The ash still falls, and on the stage, a line of plastic bins waits with children's books in them, patient as anchors. The doors open at dawn into a parking lot, slick with condensation, the sky the color of aluminum. The mountain's outline looks cut and pasted into a stranger's horizon. Outside, the air tastes like pennies. Volunteers have hung paper signs guiding people to ward buses and insurance clinics, and a tent with a hand-painted banner. Talk here. Ruiz from Public Health laughs without humor when he sees it. We should graft one of those onto the building permits, he says. Aisha nods, but her mind is on triage. The line for medication refills is already bent like an elbow. The day unfolds in stations. Clipboards first, then a queue for a photo ID replacement, birth certificates, and social security cards burned into the absence they always risked. An undocumented woman hovers near the edge of the tent, eyes on the floor, kid pressed to her hip. She's lived in this county for 11 years, cleaning houses she could never afford to rent, now told to list the serial number of possessions that exist as ash. Aisha asks a volunteer to walk with her to the legal aid table, where the person behind the forms meets their fear with Spanish that sounds like home. Fear of deportation has a smell. You can taste it in paperwork tense. It keeps people from shelters, from clinics, from help. In a corner of the fairground, the coroner's team works in a mobile unit that looks like a food truck until you see the gloves. Families enter one by one. Ooh. The word closure doesn't appear on any form, but it moves through the line like a rumor. The staff have been trained in grief and ethics, and the choreography of very small kindnesses. Explain the process. DNA swabs, dental records if you have them, waiting. They never say remains without saying person. An older man clutches a plastic grocery bag with a hairbrush and a toothbrush inside it. Ordinary artifacts that become sacred when the only way home is through a lab. Ambiguous law snarls the mind. It denies the anchor of a funeral, the specificity of a date. The ambiguous grief becomes complicated grief when nothing interrupts the loop that plays in the brain at night. What if? What if? What if? Down the road, the insurance office cues into the street. The phrase, act of God, rides the wind like a joke no one knows how to tell anymore. Rents spike like fevers. The hotel 2 towns over cancels block bookings to make way for a wedding with better margins. The term for it in disaster circles is ugly and precise. The second disaster. The first is wind and flame and water. The second is bureaucracy, delay, the math of this zip code versus that one. Stress swells and sticks around because the body doesn't distinguish between fire at the door and an inbox that won't close. Back in the gym, a volunteer passes out earplugs for the night siren tests that won't happen again. Not like that. Mara moves among families with a bag of tiny rituals, a deck of cards, a storytime schedule, a map of where to take a walk. She helps a teenager charge a phone, and then when he weeps without warning, doesn't say at least. Doesn't say could be worse. She says, your body is loud right now. We can help it whisper. Later, she will shout in a school board meeting that reopening schools fast is not just about test scores. It's a mental health intervention. Routine is a sedative without a script. Joaquin goes home. If you can call a motel off the highway home, his wife doesn't say much, and he doesn't either. Both learning the etiquette of shared speech in Catastrophe. He can't shake the image of flame bending like a person making a decision. He verifies his gear twice, then a third time, then just holds it. Sleep comes in slices, and it tastes like smoke. We wakes at 2:11, 3:48, 4:06, each time braced for a tone that doesn't come. He will not call the pier line tonight. He will keep his mouth closed until his jaw aches, and then he will open it in the kitchen, and the sound will not be words. By afternoon, a rumor arrives in the gym on a wave of phones. A convoy of looters and trucks at the edge of town, cutting fences, moving like a story wants to be believed. No. The police chief gets on a mic and says no, and Lila from the community radio she slept for. Hours and 2 days echoes it in 3 languages, and still the rumor sticks to the walls. Disasters breed rumors because fear is an ecosystem too. The answer is not scoffing, but oxygen information made fast, plain, and trusted. The public health team posts a sign on the gym door, no single session debriefs. If they had room for footnotes, they'd add the papers that show how telling the story too soon, too organized, can freeze it in the mind, not free it. They set up a quiet corner instead, stock it with coloring books and tea, hang a curtain so noise becomes a guess. They train volunteers in psychological first aid in 2 hours flat. Listen, don't promise, don't pathologize, offer water, get names right, help people name their next step. Don't say resilience like a spell. The rain forecast arrives at the end of a meeting in City Hall that was supposed to be about culverts and becomes about hearts. Burn scars hate water the way a scab hates a fingernail. The alert systema. Tone, a text. A door knock program run by people who know which doors need knocking twice ready themselves again. Re-traumatization. The word is academic until the phone on your nightstand sings the exact song it sang 2 nights ago. The brain doesn't do footnotes. It does associations. At dusk, the sky performs an old trickled on soot. Beauty in a ruined frame. Aisha walks the rows one last time and finds Ms. Delgado folding and refolding a sweater. Called. Ms. Delgado says, not meeting her eyes. They want me to go to the truck. The coroner's unit isn't a truck, and everyone knows what she means anyway. Aisha has nothing to give her that is good enough. She offers her time, and a ride, and a chair to sit in, while someone says a sentence that will tilt her life on its hinge. Joaquin stands in the motel bathroom and stares at his pupils. The tone on his phone shivers the water in the glass. Flash flood warning. The words are punctual and bored. He lifts his gear bag and is out the door before the word burn scar closes in the text. On the highway, brake lights smear into rain. In the back seat, his daughter murmurs in sleep. His wife presses her palm to the dashboard as if it were a chest, feeling for breath. Rain finds the mountain like it knows the path, and the slope makes a decision you can hear before you see it. Mud moves with a sound like language forgetting. The evacuation route that survived the fire buckles under dirty water and stumps. In the gym, the loudspeakers do not test. They speak once, clear, move to the buses. Row by row, the boy who drew the hand of wind draws a new one, brown and fast and full of bits of tree. Aisha grabs the go bag she tells other people to keep. Mara picks up a stack of attendance sheets that mean nothing now and everything later. The night becomes a continuation of the last night, and the bodies in it pick up the old choreography: stand, lift, carry, count. Ms. Delgado looks at the door and surrenders to the fact that the sentence she's waiting for can be postponed by torrential rain. Ambiguous loss has a way of multiplying. On the highway, out of town, a line of red taillights turns a ridge into a necklace. People in those cars do the math they hate to do, whether to turn back, or whether to gun it through water that looks shallow and isn't. Whether the bank will believe them when they say the second disaster swallowed the first. The rain is disciplined and heavy. The burn scar doesn't bargain. The sirens answer with a tone tuned to the bone. In the rearview mirror, Joaquin sees the slope begin to move. He sees the brake lights 5 cars ahead stop being lights and become shouts. His body prepares for the kind of work it wasn't built to do for this many days in a row. He tries not to think of the woman with the folded linens. He thinks anyway. The radio on the seat beside him mutters codes. He picks it up, and his voice is steady in the way that scares him most, the kind of steady that breaks only later. Later arrives at a school gym 2 towns over, identical to the first if you squint and take away the smoke smell and add wet wool. The cots are the same. The tape holding the power cords down the same. The poster's different. A pep rally for a team that lost to this town last fall and still talks about it like love. The people are a duplicate with slight edits. This one with a dog in a vest, that one without a charger, the boy with the wind drawing holding it like a passport to a country where rain talks loud. The mudslides stole the cul-de-sac and returned only the story. Houses sit with their mouths open, front doors taken like teeth. The road is a river, the cars inside it burgeoning islands. The crews stand on the edges with poles and lines and do math with their eyes. They speak to each other like they're alone. They wait anyway. In the shelter, the quiet corner fills. Panic repeats and reduces. It's not imagination. It's a memory shoved through today by an alert tone that sounds like last night's. Anxiety is an engine. It idles hot. The kids react the way they learned from their rooms. Some draw, some sleep, as if the cot were a boat and the water smooth. Some cuss, and the adults don't correct them. The adults take turns going outside to cry, where the wind can see them. 2 bathrooms away, a woman closes a stall and thinks about not wanting to be anywhere. It's fast and thick, a thought like a rip current. She remembers the tone and the fire and the mud and the bank's hold music. She's tired of adjectives: resilient, brave, strong. A volunteer in a yellow vest hears the lock click, and something in the silence suggests alarm. She knocks once, twice, 3 times, and keeps her voice simple. "I'll stand here," she says through the door. "I'll keep standing here." It's not suicide prevention training. It's a human at a door who knows that sometimes the difference is someone not walking away. Later, the team will huddle near the coffee urn and talk about mean safety, about asking the question that feels forbidden. Are you thinking of hurting yourself? And they will decide to train everybody, not just the staff and badges, because the myths that asking plants the idea are as wrong as superstition. Domestic violence rises not because storms make monsters, but because stress, displacement, and history turn homes into traps. The advocates know this. They show up with cards and code words in rooms somewhere else, quiet and off a bus line. In the shelter, a man tells a joke too loud and a woman flinches in a way that isn't about volume. Mara sees it and makes a note. She knows safety planning is not a form you check in blue ink. She arranges a walk. She arranges a second pair of eyes. Joaquin stands under the truck's hatch and shakes rain from his hair. His crew pulled a woman from a sedan that moved like a barge and a child from a porch that wasn't one anymore. Can't feel his fingers, and he can't feel much else either. The numbness is a reply his nervous system sends when it needs to do the job. He used to call it calm. He knows better now. He watches the hillside like it might apologize. He wants, intensely and briefly, to smash his radio on the curb. He doesn't. He adjusts the gain. says copy twice in 10 minutes when no one asked him to. Aisha coordinates triage with a piece of cardboard and a pen when the tablet dies. She sends the elderly to the cots near the warm vents. She asks the logistics team to find more adult diapers and someone to sit with Mr. Alvarez, who has not removed his boots since yesterday. She texts the county to place a counselor in the clinic that will pop open in a broom closet by morning. She thinks about the World Health Organization's MHGAP guidelines and how this is the place they live, where you train non-specialists to recognize depression, psychosis, panic, where you give tools to nurses and teachers and aunties. In disasters, the specialists are never enough. The net has to be wide and made of ordinary hands. On a whiteboard, Ruiz draws a pyramid. Basic needs at the bottom, safety and calm next, then connection, then specialized care at the top like a thumbtack pinning the rest. He writes, stepped care. Someone takes a picture. This is how you keep the word trauma from swallowing the budget for tarps. School matters. The room knows it like knowing where the exits are. Children lose their desks, their homework, the merciless gossip in hallways, and the thrill of Friday. They lose something that keeps nightmares from breeding. After the tsunami in Sri Lanka, UNICEF pitched tent schools. After earthquakes in Nepal, teachers learned to make a class out of a tarp and a story. Here, Mara pulls the principal aside and says, even to ours, even one classroom, even the cafeteria if we must. She lists studies in one breath and kids' names in the next, and the principal nods because the numbers are kind and the names are kinder. A black SUV with tinted windows pulls to the curb and two men step out with clipboards like shields. They are from the state. They mean well. They ask Aisha for numbers of displaced of calls, of acute stress disorder disabling daily function. She gives them ranges and a sentence they will not quote in a press release. Most people will be okay without therapy, some will not. The difference has less to do with grit and more to do with money, chronic stress, and whether we make it easy to ask for help. At dusk, the shelter quiets. The rain quits like a song running out. The mud rests where it settled. Ms. Delgado sits on a chair near a door marked staff and holds a paper cup that says coffee and a lie. When the coroners spoke to her, they spoke like teachers with bad news for part of the time. She was 13 again, and 58 again, then exactly the age you are when you learn you are now one person where you were two. Aisha sits with her and says nothing for long enough to mean it. There is a ritual to grief when bodies are present. A table, a framed picture, a candle. In the absence, communities invent. In Christchurch after the earthquakes, strangers left notes in holes where stone used to be. In paradise, there is a wall of keys, each one someone's door that opened and now doesn't. Here, Pastor Ruth will pull a table to the center of the gym tomorrow and lay out paper, markers, yarn. We'll tie names, she says. We'll braid them. Joaquin's daughter cries when a fire truck passes, even though it's their truck, his truck. He lifts her and feels how muscles remember drills. His wife pretends to nap on the motel bed. He cheats and researches moral injury on his phone, the wrongness you swallow when your actions contradict your map of right. He thinks of the back bedroom with the linens, puts the phone face down. A volunteer named Donnie delivers a box of earphones to the corner, where the teenagers gather and halts the rumor with music. They collectively decide to sleep in shifts not because anyone told them to, but because fear becomes a clock when nothing else is. A boy in a Raiders hoodie organizes a watch and writes their names in a notebook like a sea captain. Somebody's grandmother brings tamales and will not accept no. Hot food repairs something cold. Under the fluorescent hum, the room of cots becomes less of a place and more of a body. Statistics are absent here. Later they will come. 5 to 10% develop PTSD after disasters like this, more in those who saw flame in the doorway, whose house became news. Depression doubles in the year after. Panic taps shoulders. Substance use creeps or gallops. Domestic violence curves upward. Suicides may rise. Heat waves tick up psychiatric ER visits. The climate crisis writes new chapters in the manual while we're still reading the old ones. Tonight, those are facts in Aisha's head while she helps a teenage girl find an outlet for a charger. Just before midnight, a tired man at the edge of the room starts to laugh in a way that alarms. It is not joy and not relief. It's the laugh that arrives when the nervous system has been holding a boulder so long, it forgets it can set it down. Aisha crouches beside him with a cup of water. "Shake your arms," she says softly. "Let me see." He does. It looks ridiculous, and it looks like a damn opening. He cries and does not apologize. Around them, 100 bodies pretend to sleep the way a forest pretends to be silent at night. The rain stops. The sirens rest without really resting. Past the doors, the mountain sits with its new scars. Inside, somebody's phone chimes with a calendar notice that says, "Dentist, 9 a.m. tomorrow was supposed to be ordinary. Tomorrow will be what it is." The loudspeaker is quiet. The tarps don't move. Then the door to the lobby opens, and a city staffer strides in, with hair knotted in a fist and a face like a fuse. "Town hall at 9, she says to Aisha. "They're going to stop mental health funding to move money to culverts. You need to be there." The sentence lands like a gavel. The room doesn't hear it, but the future does. Joaquin texts his captain. "You going?" His captain replies with a single word. "Always." The gym exhales a breath it didn't know it was holding. The day is not done. The second disaster has entered the chat. The night folds around the people like a tarp, and they lie still under it, eyes open. The meeting starts with a slide deck and a smell, dust from folding chairs, wet wool, the coffee they burn at City Hall every time. It's standing room only. The projector warms and throws a graph on the wall. River gauge peaks, culvert capacities, a line for rain like a lie detector, and a different slide. Numbers taken from Aisha's clipboard and made into bullets, calls to the hotline. Panic attacks managed with breathing and an open door. Antidepressants refilled and run out. There is not enough coffee for this. A council member says resilience, and a woman in the second row laughs once in a hard way. The room turns toward her. She doesn't apologize. "Resilience is not a budget line we use to erase you," the council member says, trying. That word has worked too hard in this town, like a volunteer with good knees in a storm of stairs. It has meant different things in different mouths. A bounce back, a bounce forward, a bounce on the spot until your calves burn. The head of Public Works Browning, who knows the city's pipes like their kin, shows a photo of a culvert clogged with trees, the fire killed and the rain mobilized. "If we don't upgrade here, Zondi lives in water most winters," he says. "This is not about today's mud. This is about 10 Februaries from now." He clicks and a diagram appears, arrows blue as denial. Aisha steps up when her name is called. She doesn't have slides. She starts with a child's drawing pulled from the gym floor. The one with the wind hand and the brown river sweeping a house into the corner. She does not say incidence and prevalence. She says, "Remember a sound you will now hear when a microwave beeps? Remember the smell of something you never want to smell again showing up in your jacket next spring? Remember how long it took your heart to put its back against the wall last night?" Then she adds the numbers, because numbers buy chairs. 5 to 10% develop long-term PTSD after disasters. The rate climbs with loss, with injury, with seeing what you can't unsee. Depression doubles, panic nests, anniversaries trigger. If you cut the listening now, she says, you buy floods in the brain for years. Culverts and counselors are not enemy line items. Housing people early is anxiety treatment. Placing documents is mood stabilizer. Cash grants lower cortisol. Pastor Ruth stands and says, "Faith and facts share a room in disasters." She offers her church basement as a space for a weekly grief group. She offers the piano for when words give out. She asks the council to fund childcare for those groups because healing is not a luxury for two-parent households with day shifts and cars. A man at the back, a builder with crews idle since yesterday, says out loud what everyone knows. "We need to rebuild, and we need to move a few streets back, and we need to pay for therapy, and we need to do it without sending half of us." Downriver, the phrase "managed retreat" makes some people tense like a string tuned high. It is a theory until a home becomes a line drawn on a map. Trauma nests in maps like it does in bodies. The decision to move house, habits, stories can be as damaging as wind if done poorly, as healing as cold water if done right. Joaquin sits with his crew and feels the room's pressure change when a young woman stands, hands shaking. "I can't sleep without thinking of the door," she says, "so I drink. Then I can't sleep anyway." She does not meet anyone's eyes. His hands sweat. He imagines standing up and saying, "I can't walk past the alarm panel without throwing up in my mouth." He does not stand. He is a professional. He is a father. He is very, very tired. Research floats above this like weather. The IASC Guidelines for Mental Health and Psychosocial Support in Emergencies long title. Thin paper say, coordination matters more than charisma. The Sphere Handbook puts MHPSS in the same book as water sanitation, as if to say, of course. After Mexico earthquakes, an early warning text buys seconds that save lives. After the sirens, the mental health lines light up. In Puerto Rico, after Maria, power loss extended grief. In Christchurch, they made a public health campaign with billboards that asked, "All right?" and meant it. In Paradise, teachers became mental health workers without permission. School reopening, improvised held kids' minds together long enough to knit. The meeting sours then settles. Someone reads a list of arrests, and someone else reads a list of ordinary miracles. The statemen with clipboards write less and listen more. Browning proposes a compromise. Push culvert upgrades where the risk is a lever, not a wall. Fund a field team for MHPSS, housed in the clinic to clinicians, for peer supporters, a coordinator hire from the neighborhood. Pay door knockers because volunteers burn out and cash, used well, is oxygen. Aisha asks for a tiny budget item that changes everything. Translators on retainer, not borrowed. Linguistic access, she says, is mental health. Outside, the sky forgets what it did this week and offers a rumor of sun. The mountain sulks. In the motel, Joaquin's daughter draws a picture of a truck with a smile and her father with arms like trees. She adds rain and writes no. His wife closes the bathroom door and practices a speech she will never give him. Calls someone, the pier line, the captain, me. She opens the door and says, "We're out of milk," and leaves to buy milk. The council votes. The money splits like a river with purpose. It will still flood someone's backyard when the rain returns. The plan includes a wellness room in the school, staffed from opening bell to last bus. It includes training every bus driver in psychological first aid and hanging a poster by time clocks that says, "Not crazy, triggered." It includes cash stipends, without moralizing for people whose rent got eaten by the fire. Stipends are not therapy, and yet the curve of distress bends when the money lands. It includes memorial space downtown, where names will live so that grief has a place to sit that is not the frozen foods aisle. On the way out, a man corners Aisha and says, "You know, most of us are fine, right? We'll be fine." He isn't wrong. Most are. Humans are astonishing machines. But the distribution is not kind and not even. Those who were dragged into the river before, poverty, illness, racism, are dragooned back more often. She says this, and he says, "We'll be fine," again. And then he leans on the stairwell and cries with his face hidden by his hands. A week unspools, like thread pulled from a sweater. The school opens a wing with blue tape on the floor, and kids keep almost tripping and then don't. The wellness room smells like crayons and oranges. Clinic holds long hours and short tempers in equal measure. A telehealth service spins up because a storm knocked down poles between a therapist and a mom who cannot leave her cot. The pastor's basement fills with tears and songs on Wednesdays. The peer team sits in a circle on Fridays and says where it hurts in a language that doesn't bad shame. The fire camp across the ridge calls for help after a wind day that hurts to crew. Air ops cancel for 10 hours and nobody dies, and the relief tastes like water. Then the sky turns cruelly blue, the day a mirror of the day the fire came. It's an anniversary in the body, not on a calendar. People think they are fine all morning, and at noon they want to run. The red flag warning adds itself to the afternoon like a chorus with a song everyone hates. The cameras on towers pivot west. A puff of smoke makes a line on a screen that could be cloud and isn't. The alert tone is gentler now, tuned lower, something a committee fought about for weeks. Phones buzz. Red flag day. This is not a fire. Check your plan. Breathe. Joaquin stands by the truck and can't feel his hands again. He flexes them like a man in a movie and hates himself for being in one. Aisha sits in the wellness room and watches 3 kids draw wind hands in rain. One draws a heart around both. The council's compromise landed like rain on roofs, not enough to fill a cistern but enough to make noise. The culverts wait for concrete. The peer team sets coffee on a folding table. Browning stands in the yard and looks at the sky like a man reading tea leaves. The tower camera sees a flicker. Become a line, become a snake. A dispatch drops a tone. The room that was a gym last week becomes a room with the same smell and different signs. The sirens do not scream, they purr. People look up instead of sprinting. Someone counts backwards from 5, because Mara taught them, and someone else says aloud, like a spell that is math, the camera saw it early. The adrenaline flares and drops. On the ridge, crews knock the fire down at a road that was cut after last season's grief. It curls like a cat and sleeps. Air ops return after an hour. The line holds. The alert returns to phones, contained at 10 acres. Thank you for breathing. The message is corny and correct. In the clinic, Aisha exhales so long it makes her head swim. Joaquin sits on the bumper and admits in a text to his captain what's been true for 10 days. I need to talk to someone. The town stares into a future that looks like more of this: storms and warnings and small fires held early. Paperwork and plans and grief that arrives in waves and not always on schedule. What they build now will decide how they stay human in it. The room is still, one beat before applause, one beat before someone sneezes, one beat before life resumes. In that space there is a decision. It's tiny and massive, whether to write mental health in their plans as a separate line or as a thread woven through water, roads, schools, sirens. The beat ends. The truck's back into bays and the high school bell rings at the wrong time of day, and nobody complains. The ridge smolders like a reminder and stops. The meeting disperses. The night holds. Morning will ask for a list. The list will begin with names. Names written on paper loops tied together over the gym doorway, a chain that says we remember and we are not done. The memorial table in the square holds candles and jars that used to hold peaches. Ms. Delgado comes at dusk and lays her husband's comb under a photograph and sits without speaking. A teenage boy, the one who ran the makeshift watch list, stands 10 feet off and practices a speech he won't give, remembering how his hands didn't shake when someone needed them not to. Pastor Ruth plays one low note on the piano and lets it hum under the murmur of 100 conversations. 6 months slide by the way mud dries. Edges first, center last. The school's wellness room is busiest not in the first week but at week 12, when the world has decided it's over. Mara teaches breathing that doesn't feel like a trick. She teaches teachers how to say, I see you, with an attendance sheet. The district adopts a trauma-informed schedule for drills. No more surprise alarms with doors slammed and lights cut. They do announce. They do explain. They do allow opting out and swaying in and counting to 4 together. The gym teacher rewrites the curriculum to include Run for Joy on days the wind tests the fences. The clinic's MHPSS field team goes door to door. They bring pamphlets. No one reads. And a pot of beans, people do. They introduce themselves to neighbors who've never wanted strangers at the gate. They teach psychological first aid to barbers and bus drivers, pastors and aunties, middle schoolers who memorize scripts better than adults. They partner with the tribe downriver to hire a counselor who doesn't have to translate metaphors out of water for healing. They pay interpreters like professionals because they are. They bring in a psychiatrist 1 day a week and put the rest of the budget into peer support and practical help rides, childcare, rent. Joaquin calls the peer line. He sits in his truck with the windshield a gray rectangle and talks to a man who knows exactly which radio code hurts to hear. He goes to one group in a church basement, and then he goes to another and says nothing, and third time he says 2 sentences that don't sound like excuses. The department's culture shifts a half degree, and then another captains say out loud that counseling is not weakness. They write it into the schedule like SCBA inspections. The crew adds a 222 check at shift end. 2 minutes to breathe. 2 to say what the day did to your head. 2 to plan the first good thing you'll do before the next call. It sounds corny until it works. Cash assistance lands like rain on roofs, small grants, triggered by gauges and maps, not by forms that punish. The parametric policy that the council approved in a meeting no one televised pays out with a line of code and a line of people at the bank. Cortisol goes down when rent is paid. The clinic logs it in a spreadsheet. Not because numbers cure sadness, but because later they will need to fight for this again, and data is a kind of armor. The telehealth service that spun up in the storm stays. A grandmother in an apartment above a bodega talks to a therapist on a phone. Her Grandson charges every night so she won't miss their Friday appointment. A man whose shift starts at 6 a.m. checks in with a counselor at 5:30 from his truck cab. The church basement adds childcare to the grief group and the attendance doubles. The barber shop becomes a place to cry without embarrassment. The barber has a card under the counter with a hotline on it and a sentence he memorized, "Call them Hermano," they'd pick up. The town realizes what it overlooked the first month. The home care workers whose clients died lost jobs as well as families. The undocumented who didn't come to the tent have trauma that doesn't leave because a rumor does. The people with disabilities who were last on the bus will be last again, unless the plan says otherwise in bold. The pregnant woman whose blood pressure spiked when the sky turned red now watches the weather like a villain and needs someone to say, "You're not crazy." The elders whose languages don't have a word like PTSD, but have stories about war and hunger that rhyme with this year. The MHPSS team writes a list, and the council funds the line items under it. Home visits, transportation vouchers, interpreters, disability advocates in planning meetings, quiet rooms in shelters, refrigeration for meds. The second disaster keeps trying. Insurance companies argue. Landlords evict, contractors overbook. But the city hires navigators who know how to sit for 3 hours with a person on hold, and they celebrate wins like births. Legal aid sues and sometimes loses, and sometimes settles, and sometimes changes a rule that will matter for the next fire. Anniversaries return like tides. The town stands still, then applauds, then laughs at itself. The camera network catches a poof of dust on a ridge, and the alert says no action. People. Breathe because the message said more than fear. The school holds a regular day with extra recess, and Pizza the principal calls it a ritual of defiance. Elsewhere, the world is busy with its own storms. A heat dome in the city 3 hours south sends a flood of psychiatric emergencies to ERs not designed for that kind of weather. The clinic prints flyers that say cool rooms here in 5 languages and quietly collects fans. A hurricane takes a bite out of a coast 2 time zones away, and the church in town sends money to a clinic there because the pamphlet they used was written by someone in that coastal town after a different wind. The network of attention broadens. It becomes normal for the fire chief to talk to a pastor in Puerto Rico about what battery backup system kept insulin cold. It becomes normal for Aisha to join a Zoom with women in Bangladesh who run community listening circles under corrugated roofs and to take notes like a student. The word resilience changes shape. It stops meaning carry more and starts meaning share weight. It includes culverts and counselors, in camera towers and quiet rooms, cash transfers and rituals, translators and teachers trained to say you're safe in a way kids believe. It sits in the same sentence as mitigation and equity, without anyone flinching, earns its keep. There is no final victory lap. Grief doesn't end. It evolves. Miss Delgado finds herself laughing at something on TV a year later and cries harder because of it and then doesn't apologize. Tenzin adopts a cat from a shelter that lost a wing in the storm and names it after. The boy who drew the wind hand draws a map of the town, with a blue line where the river is supposed to go, and a brown zigzag where it did, and a heart where the school is now. He writes, "Plan" across the top like it's a superhero title. On a wet Tuesday under a normal sky, the city conducts a drill. The sirens, the texts arrive in 3 languages, and a 4th in progress. The door knockers knock. The bus drivers check their routes. The wellness room opens early. The alert tone turns a head and not a stomach. People move with the grace that practice builds. They count backwards from 5. They breathe. The culverts clear water like professionals. The hillside holds because roots have begun to return, and the slope has been terraced where it matters. The drill ends. The kids go to math. The adults go to work. Aisha sits on a bench outside the clinic and lets the quiet take up space. What we overlook when we count roofs and roads. The minds that wake at 3 a.m. because wind fingered the trees. The laugh that alarms instead of delights. The teacher whose jaw hurts because she clenched for a month. The firefighter who buys milk to avoid saying help. The undocumented mother who crossed one border and now crosses administrative ones for food. The elder who knows the word for grief in 4 tongues but never needed it this often. What we can build if we look, plans that name these things, money that follows care, translators and teachers and barbers funded and trained, drills that don't injure, shelters that welcome pets and medications in dignity, memorials that hold what words can't. The future is not kinder, it is busier. Fires and floods will stack like insults. The answer is not a bigger badge or a louder speaker. It is a quilt. Culverts giving water a path that isn't a living room. Cameras that see smoke before eyes do. Alerts that arrive in the right language at the right time. Schools that open first and last. Clinics funded for grief and for panic and for sleeping pills when they help and taper plans when they don't. Peer teams that stay after the cameras leave. Parametric money that lands like rain. Meetings where numbers and names sit next to each other and neither is banished. A year after the first night in the gym, they gather again on the blacktop with folding chairs and paper cups and a piano. The banner over the door says, "Plain, we remember, we prepare." The boy who drew the hand of wind reads a sentence into a microphone, and his voice doesn't tremble. Joaquin stands in the shade of the truck and feels his pulse settle at a siren somewhere else. Mara watches a kid count backward from 5 before a drill and sees a jaw unclench. Aisha arranges a stack of flyers on the corner table. The pier line, the clinic hours, the grief circle, the timetable for culvert replacement, the school calendar. Pastor Ruth plays a low note and lets it hum under the sound of a town that isn't cured but is living. When the wind picks up, heads turn, then return to the program. It's not that they forgot. It's that they practiced remembering without drowning. The ash in the corners has been swept and returned sometimes anyway. The smell of smoke lives in jackets and is washed out by rain. The sky is not an enemy. It is weather. The sirens are not betrayal. They are instruments they tune together. If stories like this move you, subscribe for more true events that change the world.